Good morning, everyone. My name is Justin Sears, Product Marketing Manager at Hortonworks. It's my pleasure to host our 8-webinar series entitled Discover HDP 2.2, covering all the new capabilities for Enterprise Hadoop delivered in Hortonworks Data Platform version 2.2. Today's comprehensive Hadoop security with Apache Ranger and Apache Knox is the first webinar in the series. I'll be your host today, and I'm joined by two Hadoop security experts. Vinay Shukla is a Director of Product Management at Hortonworks. He is responsible for Apache Knox in Hortonworks Data Platform. Balaji Ganesan is Hortonworks Senior Director of Enterprise Security Strategy. Balaji is responsible for Apache Ranger, which was recently renamed from Apache Argus. Here's today's agenda. We'll begin with an overview of the new security innovation in HTTP 2.2, centralized security with Apache Ranger, followed by API security with Apache Knox. Then we'll show a demo and finish with time for Q&A. We've got 30 minutes, so we're going to move quickly. All attendee phone lines have been muted. If you have questions during the presentation, please send them to Vinay Shukla in WebEx chat. We will take time to answer those at the end of the call. If we do not have time to answer all of the questions, we will include a full Q&A in an upcoming blog post about this call. Let me set the stage for Balaji and Vinay. The data center is in the process of re-platforming to include Enterprise Hadoop as a core component in the modern data architecture. Business, technical, and financial factors are driving this shift. On the business side, greater data availability allows decision makers to move from reactive rear-view mirror analytics to proactive interactions that reduce costs and improve loyalty with customers, partners, suppliers, and employees. Technical teams are adopting Hadoop in response to the exponential growth in data, much of it in newer, less structured formats from sensor, geolocation, clickstream, or social media sources. And finally, companies are responding to the growing costs of data systems that are consuming an increasing share of IT expenditures. Hadoop's commodity hardware and open source software relieve that pressure and free economic resources for other opportunities. For example, Hortonworks customer TrueCar stores and processes data in HDP at an effective cost of 23 cents per gigabyte per month, compared to the alternative of $19 per month with a traditional platform. Enterprise customers that address these needs with traditional vendors can find an inequitable balance of power. Apache Hadoop brings new options and helps rebalance that equation in your favor. Here are some of the new types of data I mentioned. These are difficult to efficiently store and process with a schema on write column and row storage platform, precisely because their data structures vary in unpredictable ways. Apache Hadoop has a schema on read architecture. All types of data can be stored in Hadoop regardless of source or structure, and then the query determines what data best answers the analyst or data scientist's question. HDP helps our customers make the shift from a reactive, post-transaction approach to data towards a more proactive, pre-decision approach to interactions with customers, partners, suppliers, and employees. Again, no matter the vertical, this transition is happening. Advertisers move from mass branding targeting the median customer towards one-to-one personalized targeting. Financial companies move from educated investing to automated algorithms that find new complex opportunities and present them to investors with enough time to take action. Healthcare providers and pharmaceutical companies can more precisely tailor treatment protocols and drugs according to genomics, age, gender, medical history, and a long list of other factors that affect outcomes. And retailers are offering personalized experiences online or in the store according to who each shopper is and what he or she prefers to buy. Telcos move from fixing broken transmission equipment to replacing it before it breaks at a much lower cost. Here is the modern data architecture with Hadoop that makes these precise proactive decisions possible. It consolidates data that might currently exist in many silos managed by different business groups. It allows you to manage a single data set on a single cluster and reduces redundant IT investment in multiple platforms. With all the data in one place, it supports common services for security, governance, and operations that can be managed centrally, reducing cost and improving consistency. The modern data architecture also preserves existing investment in current tools and platforms. Hortonworks has taken the lead to partner with other data center technology vendors to make sure that Hadoop is a +1 with existing investments in Microsoft, Teradata, HP, SAP, Oracle, and many other leading technology vendors. So choosing Hortonworks Data Platform does not require you to abandon any other technology that's already working well for you. Rather, the modern data architecture lets you handle each data workload with the best technology in a way that's seamless to your end users, giving you a single view of your customer, your product, and your supply chain. Yarn is the architectural center of Hadoop. It makes Hadoop a common data platform that can be accessed by many applications at once, supporting multi-tenant access and processing. Yarn makes batch, interactive, and real-time processing possible on one data set in a single highly available cluster. And Yarn also provides a single standard for third-party ISV data access tools. At Hortonworks, we make it easy for our partners to develop applications that work with Yarn, and then we certify those partner applications as Yarn ready. Enterprise Hadoop also requires a central set of services for cluster governance, operations, and security. Everything that plugs into Hadoop inherits those services. HDP 2.2 delivers enterprise Hadoop and vertical integration with Yarn and HDFS. This ensures that engines can run reliably and respectfully in a Yarn-based cluster. Features throughout the various HDP stack components facilitate this vertical integration. HDP 2.2 with Yarn as its architectural center also integrates horizontally with key enterprise services for governance, security, and operations. This ensures that those enterprise services apply consistently across the entire Hadoop stack, and it also integrates with existing data center solutions for those key requirements. To sum up, HDP 2.2 delivers the power of Yarn for dynamic resource allocation and multiple workloads, with comprehensive enterprise capabilities for governance, security, and operations. And it enables broad ecosystem adoption of enterprise Hadoop, with the widest range of deployment options on Linux or Windows, on-premise, or in the cloud. Today's webinar will focus specifically on security services, and we will cover the other components of HDP 2.2 on the other 7 webinars. So now I'll turn it over to Balaji Ganesan. He'll start us off with Apache Ranger, which used to be known as XA Secure and then briefly as Apache Argus. Please remember to send Vinay Shukla any questions in chat, and we'll answer those at the end. Let me turn it over to you, Balaji.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. Hi. So what we will do, we'll talk about Apache Ranger and Apache Knox, and quickly about Apache Ranger. It's a new name suggested by the Apache community. We were briefly called Apache Argus, and Argus came out as an incubation effort into Apache where Hortonworks made a commitment to give completely open source the technology Hortonworks acquired from XA Secure. And it kind of underlines our commitment to making fully open source our technology and drive innovation in the community. And so Apache Ranger will continue to focus on the work XA Secure team has done and probably innovate more with the community. So quickly about those of you who are new to XA Secure or Ranger, we focus on few concepts. So we focus on centralized administration of security, and we focus on fine-grained access control and auditing within the Hadoop platform. The centralized security administration is an important element in the enterprise adoption. It's the single pane of glass that we offer for security administrators to go and manage their policies on a daily basis and also look through auditing details. Security will drive towards having a centralized console or REST APIs where administrators don't have to go to each individual component within Hadoop to manage security. They can go and manage it centrally in one place as a platform. And so it currently Previously to Champlain, we used to support from an authorization perspective HDFS Hive and HBase. We have added a few more components as part of the 2.2 stack, and we'll continue to drive more components, and we're working with partners as well to see if we can enable beyond Hadoop the kind of consistent security that we offer today. In terms of what we do quickly on the authorizations, we enable within the centralized security console to give very fine-grained access control and ability to manage policies through this UI. And this is one example you see of an HDFS policy, where the users can easily go and manage what resources they'd like to control, and manage some configuration parameters, and assign groups or users and have them define permissions. So a very intuitive way to go and easily manage those in the UI. What we also offer through Ranger is concept of centralized auditing. We collect a lot of detailed audit data and we pull up in central place. So auditors can come in and drill down very easily using our UI into specific access of each component. They can also find out if a particular resource, how many people have access over a period of time, and how many had denied requests versus accepted requests. So we offer those drill down capabilities with auditing as well. In terms of 2.2, there's a lot of work that has happened within Hortonworks, and we have started to see that in the community as well. We are offering in Ranger new components of HDP stack, which is now supported. So we now support Apache Storm authorization and auditing, and Apache Knox authorization and auditing. I'll show you in a few minutes around a demo on how Knox looks like. We also, as part of our commitment, continued with deeper integration into the Hadoop stack. We have enabled now support on Windows, which is consistent with the Hortonworks platform support as well. And we also enabled new integration with Hive, and we're enabled to do more than before. We now support grant and revoke commands set locally, and those can be captured in our administration portal. Similarly, in HBase administrators can go look into command line and do grant and revoke, and we are able to capture that and store in our policy administration tool. And consistent to our enterprise readiness, we are exposing REST APIs for our policy management. You don't necessarily have to use the UI to manage it. You can use the REST APIs to do that. And we also scaling up our audit to have a flexibility to not only store in MySQL or Oracle, but store in HDFS. So enterprises can truly scale with their big data operations in terms of audit. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague Vinay to talk about Apache Knox.
Thanks, Balaji, and thanks, Justin, before. So I want to talk about Apache Knox and why it matters. So Apache Knox provides API security in Hadoop. So one problem we all know we have is that we often have a big modern data architecture supported by Hadoop, and we want to extend the reach of that to more and more employees, our outside vendors and partners. And the model that supports that is REST API. So each of the Hadoop components offer the REST API, but accessing the REST API of each component directly, it's you don't have basically a directory of all the REST APIs. So what Knox does is it provides, it centralizes the security for all the components REST API, and where you can securely extend the reach of REST API to anyone on any device. So if you were to deal with the REST API of individual components directly, you will have to worry about exposing the cluster and host name for those REST API to all users. That's leaking the network security. You'll have to worry about the different level of security capabilities of those REST API. For example, some may support basic authentication, others may support Spinego. And then you'll also have to deal with the Kerberos issues directly. So a better way is to put an API gateway in front of those REST API, such as Apache Knox, and at that point, you can apply uniform level of security across authentication, different capabilities such as SSO, and you can serve that gateway to also protect those REST APIs. So here's a diagram that talks about the architecture. So in Hadoop, if you want to have the REST API, essentially those REST API are not end-user facing REST API. A developer may be able to write a REST API call using curl, but an end user, a business user, is not going to call REST APIs directly. So they will call an application that's deployed in a business tier. You can route those applications to your Hadoop cluster through a load balancer and Apache Knox and hide the internal details of the Hadoop cluster. And with all the recent security breaches, you want to make sure all the traffic going in through Knox to your Hadoop cluster is encrypted through wire encryption, and all the data that's stored is encrypted as well. And so Knox is primarily used for extending the reach of your Hadoop cluster to business user. It does not alter sort of the data ingest model, and that typically the different tooling we have, it puts data directly into Hadoop cluster, and that's and it also the administrators and people who are used to using with Hadoop over RPC call through a Bastion node, they continue to use that model. So what are the new features of Knox in HDP 2.2? So I know some of you may not be familiar with the new features of Knox in our previous release, but the focus of this webinar is the new features we are introducing for Knox. So in terms of the new features of Knox, it supports the new API for Yarn REST API, it supports HDFS HA, and it offers SSL support to Knox from the REST API endpoint to Knox and all the way to the Hadoop cluster. And we also have started with management API for Knox. And in this version, there is also integration with Apache Ranger for service level authorization. So that's the new feature. Let's dive into a demo that Balaji will run.
Thanks a lot, Vinay. So let me quickly jump into a demo, and hopefully, let me see if you can see my screen. I'll share my desktop. And okay. Yeah, just ping us in the chat if you're having issues accessing or seeing the demo. So this, okay, fantastic. So this is the first screen that you see when you install Ranger, and what you see is different components that we can set up. We have a concept of repository, so you can set up a dev or a production repository for each individual component. So from 2.2, we have started supporting Knox and Storm. The rest of the look and feel of Ranger is very similar to what's available today in 2.1. So you have a concept of policy manager, you have a concept of users and groups where you can import it from LDAP or Unix. You have a concept of reporting and seeing what policies are available across the platform, and then you have audit, and that's where you start getting all the audit information, and you can slice and dice based on it. The policy manager, I want to show you briefly on Knox, and I have a policy created for Knox. So the concept of Knox service level authorization, so you can have topologies which can pertain to a cluster, and then you can filter down based on specific services. In this case, services could be Web HDFS or JDBC or ODBC or HTTP. And you can choose individual services, including a star means that all services are part of this policy. Then you can start assigning groups and users. So in this case, I have a policy which is disabled. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to assign a user called guest and see if we can allow.
Somebody is reporting that and they can't see our audio. Oh, never mind. Okay, say audio is restored.
Yes. Fantastic. So sorry for that. So I'll repeat. So I'm showing you a screen for Knox, and this is a policy for Knox which is disabled. So I'm going to run some Knox commands and enable it. So in this case, I'm allowing for a topology called sandbox, and I'm allowing guests to use any services within this topology. So if I go to my command line, I have a command to access Knox and WebHDFS service within Knox. So, and I'm going to run this and see if this goes through. And what you will get if you don't have a policy is that you will get a forbidden error, right? And you can go back to the policy manager and see if I enable this policy, which means I'm allowing for access, will it go through? So I run the same command and it goes through. So what Ranger does is it externalizes the service level authorization that Knox already has. And now you can go and manage through UI. And what you also get is you get auditing. So you can go into our audit data and choose Knox as a particular repository. And you'll be able to see all the actions coming in. So we did a denied action. This came up. And we also changed our policy and got allowed. So those will be available as part of Knox. The second part I wanted to show you is part of Hive. We now support local grant and revoke. And so if your DBAs used to local grant and revoke, they can now do that, and the policies will start appearing in the policy manager. So I'm going to run a Hive query, and I'm using Hue to do that. So I'm going to say, I'm going to grant select update on table customer underscore details to a user network one. And I'm going to run this and see if this creates a policy. Okay. And if I go to my policy manager and do a refresh, you will see a new policy gets created automatically. So what we are doing is we're intercepting this grant revoke, creating a policy for this user called network one. And now anytime anybody's network one is trying to access this Hive table, the authorization policies will get enforced. So I can do grant, I can do revoke. So if I can take off selective permissions, and if I say I can go back to my query and say revoke update, and I want to take off the update permission and give only select. So I can do that, and it should be now available as part of the Argus policy administrator. Okay, so now you'll see that the network user only has a select permission, and the update permission got revoked. So there are a bunch of permissions available. We'll document that, and we'll publish it as part of our GA. The third thing I wanted to show very quickly before I turn it over to Justin is the concept of REST APIs. See, all the actions that I did in the policy manager is now available to REST API. And I can go and create, I have an example of a policy for creating an HDFS. So in HDFS, I can go and see if there's a policy exists. And if it does not, I can go and run this command. Okay. So what it's doing is it's creating a policy, and you provide all the parameters in the policy level on what the policy should do, what the resources are, what are the users and groups in an API format. And you can do that through the API, and it will give you a response back on what was done. In this case, there was a policy ID 23, which was created. So if I refresh my screen, you'll see the policy got created, and this is the policy I created through my API. And I can go and update this policy. I can retrieve this policy using this ID. So if I have an example of retrieving the policy where if I mention the policy ID 23, it will give me all the policy details back. So every action, create, delete, update, changing all the policies that you're doing in the UI, it's now available through the REST API. So we'll publish the REST APIs as well as part of the documentation. And I think this is going to be incredible for our customers and partners who want to manage policies externally and not use the UI. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Justin, and see if we can continue with our presentation and Q&A.
Thank you so much, Balaji. Let me take, I'll take presentation back. And I know questions have been coming in on chat, so let me put it right back to you, Vinay. What if you could start going through some of the questions we've gotten and give answers to those?
Yeah, so I was in the middle of answering a question on the performance. So with Ranger, all policies are enforced locally. So all the component Ranger supports, for example, the question specifically was for Hive authorization. So Ranger is smart that it manages the policy centrally in one location, but then it pushes the policy down to each component. So the policy for Hive, for example, is enforced locally by Hive. So in terms of performance, you get the same performance with Ranger being integrated that you get without Ranger if you're using the authorization locally within Hive. So in terms of performance, there is no impact. But in terms of management, there is a sea change. Now the policy are all managed from one central location, and the audit capabilities are available from one central location.
Great. How about another question?
So there was a question on how does Ranger hook itself into various services to enforce authorization? Does Hive HBase provide necessary hooks for Ranger policies? Yes, and that's the work we have done even in more Hive is to make this hook even better. So in Hive's case, there's a Hive authorization API, and Ranger has an implementation of that we are embedded within the Hive. In HBase's case, HBase also has an authorization method where an external coprocessor can be used. And in this case, Ranger has a coprocessor which is invoked as part of the HBase process, and that is used for the authorization. So they're well-defined hooks. And even in Knox case and Storm, we have used those hooks to get implemented. And that's the idea of Ranger is we don't want to necessarily change anything within the component, but we want to use those hooks to externalize the management of the authorization, and enforcement is happening through the policies defined centrally or through the UI.
So there are two more questions. One question is how do you secure access to the management API, the management REST API? So there are two concepts in security. One is authentication. You can support authentication through Knox. You can put Knox in front of these REST APIs. And just like all the other REST API component, we can do that. The other model is direct REST API access. If you're not using Knox, you can directly access the Ranger's REST API, and we'll support authentication and authorization through there.
Yep.
And then the next question is how does the integration work with SiteMinder for SSO? And I presume because the person asking the question didn't put for Knox. So with Knox, we support SSO. So for all the REST API that you're exposing to your Hadoop component or that you are interested in exposing to your end users, if your enterprise already has SiteMinder or some other SSO system, you can support all the SSO through Knox. So for example, when you deploy Knox, it supports SiteMinder or Oracle Access Manager or Tivoli base integration. You can deploy Knox in with mod proxy. You can deploy Knox with an Apache HTTP server and leverage in the same place the integration that is offered by Apache HTTP server, or you can directly integrate with Knox. The next question is about how does ODBC, JDBC driver talks to API gateway in a secure way. So I'll give a very brief answer. A more elaborate answer to this question, I have published a blog and that on this very topic that you can go read in great details, and we'll link to that blog. But in summary, the answer is with Hive using Beeline, and when you configure the Hive server's thrift gateway, ODBC, JDBC calls can be routed over HTTP. So then it becomes an HTTP call, and Knox can support those calls, securing those calls. So the main use case is how do you provide ODBC, JDBC access over HTTP? You enable thrift server calls and route those calls through Apache Knox. and Knox can provide authentication via encryption and authorization through Argus, and we can do that.
Vinay, thank you very much. I know we're up at the half hour, so I'm sure we didn't get to all the questions, but we'll be publishing a blog at the beginning of next week with the answer to all the questions that we answered on the call in writing, as well as any that we didn't get to. So I want to respect everyone's time and thank you, Vinay and Balaji, for taking time to share your expertise around securing Hadoop clusters so that data can be accessed by a broader set of stakeholders within the enterprise in a way that aligns with company security policies. I also want to thank all of you participants for taking time today to learn about how security is integrated within HDP 2.2. If you haven't signed up for the other 7 Discover HDP 2.2 webinars, you can do that from hortonworks.com/webinars. They're all there. Next Thursday, October 30th at 10 a.m. Pacific time, we'll hold the second webinar in the series, Even Faster SQL Queries with Apache Hive and Stinger.next. We hope you can join us for that next week. This ends today's webinar. Thank you very much.